Thanks, Jess. So the internet is changing everything, right? It's changing the way we buy stuff, the way we keep in touch with friends and family, the way we date, the way we buy holidays. Yeah, fine. And I think that the internet is only just beginning to change, however, the way we organize, the way we mobilize ourselves, whether that is at a community level, in your neighborhood, in your local town, in your area, whether it's in terms of a national campaign, something you really care about, that you want government or the powers that be, corporates, whoever it might be, to hear about. And also, and most excitingly, I think, at a governmental level. So how we govern ourselves, how we create constitutions, and how we create policies that govern the whole of society, whether that's in the UK or whether that's globally. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about, first of all, an example at the community level that really inspired me and made me think about the power and the potential power of the internet as a tool for organizing and mobilizing. This is a blank map, or it was in 2009 when the screenshot was taken. It's actually got 250,000 or so people living here, which is about the same amount of people as my hometown of Newcastle. And I know that if I looked at a map of Newcastle and saw a blank space, I'd be pretty pissed off. The reason it's blank is because it's actually an area of an informal settlement on the outskirts of Nairobi in Kenya, where 250,000 people live in very cramped and unsanitary conditions, and there's nothing to show of it on the map. They're people just like you and me and all the people in Newcastle. So I found this fantastic project that just made me really see the difference between this and this, when citizens are given control of their own story. And in this case, they did it through community mapping, through getting people out into the community using GIS mapping devices, but also doing a lot of offline work in workshops to work out things like what the local assets are in the local area, the things that people were proud of, the things that people used, health centres, community spaces, whatever it might be, as well as some of the problems in the local area as well. So it's really important that they were mapping both things. What you can see here is something that was revealed through these activities and shared now for anybody to see. Anybody in the world can see it here on the map. So they've claimed their identity and found a way of empowering themselves through this. This is great. I was very amused to see that this map's also painted up on the walls, which goes to show that there are really a long way to go around how people actually use technology on a day-to-day basis. We've got a text message number there, and we've got the version of the map actually painted up on the wall there. So it kind of shows that, fine, we can have these fantastic online products, but we still need to think about offline things too. So I'm going to just tell you a few things that Nesta's been looking at lately around how this works in the UK. So we're part of a research project, a much bigger project, sponsored by AHRC and EPSRC, looking at how communities in the UK are using media to transform and mobilize their local people around how they design their own communities. We're going to find out a lot more about how that works through that project. We're also working on working with Cooperatives UK to look at how co-ops can modernize and change in the future through doing using digital tools to organize how they actually conduct their meetings and how they participate, how their members can participate. This is a really important first step on what I think would be a big journey for the movement in the future as to how they can incorporate tools like digital organizing tools to take co-ops to a much wider audience and increase participation. And last but not least, we're looking at how communities are using crowdfunding websites to actually reveal new kinds of projects that they want to take action on in their area and to get together and fund them themselves. So it's a very empowering kind of technology, or it can be. And I think we're really just at the beginning of understanding how we can mix all these things up and use them in ways that can improve neighborhoods and lives at a community and local level. But what about bigger movements? Let's think a bit bigger and go up a step. when you think about activism, you might think of the things that you see in the red box on the left there. People on trestle tables in local shopping centres with a petition to, you know, save the animals or whatever it might be. But then also on a huge scale, mobilising, getting people physically into spaces in towns and cities with their bodies. They're protesting and saying we oppose something. It's a very organised, top-down kind of protest. The picture you see there is actually one of the biggest protests in the UK, with estimated, it was the Iraq protest, estimating up to 2 million people in one space in London. And on the other box there, the blue box, you see the newcomers, who are, I think, a fantastic asset. It's a first step into many people to take part in community action of some kind by signing their name on a petition online. It can be a first step to taking part in many other ways in organising people and taking part and taking a role and having a voice in the things that you care about. But they do get accused of selectivism, which I think is quite unfair. I think what they're doing is meeting a need for a new way of involving people in taking action on the things they care about. So you might recognise this kind of symbol over the last few years. The Occupy movement, the Occupy hashtag, the anonymous masks. These are symbols that have been picked up and adopted by people all over the world to create what I would call not just a campaign in the sense of the Iraq campaign, but really starting to build a movement off the back of these platforms that is not going away. Change.org at the minute has 45 million members alone, and there are more platforms and more organising spaces and civic spaces online. It's a growing trend. So what was different about Occupy and what was interesting and exciting about Indignados, M15 and all those other movements is that they were really starting to think about how they combine these tools and use them to make something bigger than a one-off campaign, bigger than a community action, more of a movement for change. They used online and offline things to achieve that, and within their meetings, they started to think about projects and things that they could start building and creating off the back of the larger campaign. So the Red House you see there is a campaign against repossessions. So they're starting to build concrete things off the back of the campaign. It is still early days yet, though I feel there's much, much more to come. One of the other projects that Nesta's looking forward to working on very soon with a lot of international partners, it's an EU-funded project. It's around how we're going to be looking at the three areas behind represent the three countries and movements that we're going to be looking at. The Democracia Real Ya movement in Spain it's sort of part of, similar to Occupy. And we're going to look at how they can use online organising tools in a more sort of deliberate way to start making decisions more effectively, to start drawing from community resources and start exchanging between different chapters. We're also going to be taking a look at what we can learn from Iceland. I don't know if anybody here has heard much about the Icelandic Constitution. It was an experiment where people actually tried to start writing their own constitution online in response to the banking crisis. And it got down to a very quite far through the process. At the minute it's been blocked, and I hope it'll come back, but I think seems quite unlikely at the moment. But it goes to show, and it's a fantastic example of how you've got citizens mobilizing in informal groups, using the internet to the max to do that, and then staid institutions that do not know how to or don't want to actually engage with that kind of bottom-up action. Last but not least, we're going to be looking at open ministry, which is a Finnish example that I think is quite exciting because it's one of the sort of few places I can think of where they've really captured sort of bottom-up internet organising. In this case, through policy, policy and movements, suggestions and idea sourcing. They've done this online to come up with ideas that they want to take to the Parliament. And then they vote on them, turn it into a sort of petition online, but then it actually gets turned into a bill and connects into the parliamentary system in a much more fluid way than the petitioning sites that you saw before. So these are the hybrid models that are just starting to test out and test the boundaries of what's possible when it comes to looking at new governance systems from the top, where we look at traditionally top-down government, international and national governance systems, to that campaigning middle, where we've got huge movements of people coming together to try and mobilise around different issues, right down to that community base, where we're seeing local people change their local area and acting together to make their lives better on a very personal level. So that's, I guess, a summary of some of the things that I'm really interested in. I'm going to be running a workshop at 3:10 if you want to come along and find out a bit more about where this could all lead in the future. So I'd love to see you there. Thank you.